Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today, I'm going to talk to somebody who is fast becoming a legend, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I have to confess that up until a few years ago, I was unfamiliar with this gentleman's work. I don't read the newspapers, you see. Why would I see cartoons in the newspaper, apart from when I was a kid reading the Peanut strip and those sort of things? And then my attention was taken to these wonderful images that seem to be going and being shared on the internet of things that were very pertinent, especially around 2020. And we all know what happened then. So my guest, ladies and gentlemen, really needs no introduction because I think we're certainly among my audience, people are certainly aware of what he does. And he has an amazing book with some fantastic illustrations, and we're going to have a look at those. It is, of course, Bob Moran. Bob, welcome very much to the show.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's lovely to be joining you.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, I have been, of course, since I was aware of your work, admiring and seeing them, and people would, send them to me, and you just go, yeah, that sums up exactly how I feel. And that is the strength of the sort of work, the cartoons that you do. But I want, before we get on to that, I want to talk a little bit about yourself, if we may, because you used to work for the Telegraph, and then you were sacked. But before all of that, how did you get into it? Just so that people know, I've set up a little camera here to the side of me. People can't quite see it from that point. But if I do this, oh, hang on, I have to do that. You'll see you've got this wonderful book. We're going to look at these pictures in more detail. But your artistry is just fantastic. And you've got some very hilarious and some very poignant pictures that just really go to the heart. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit about how you got into drawing.
Well, I've always loved to draw. In fact, if you flip to the very beginning of the book, there are a couple of pictures right at the start in the introduction. One of my mother and one of my father. If you get, yeah.
Oh
There.
yes, here we go. Here we go.
I drew those when I was about 6 or 7. So I'd always done this since I could hold a pencil, really. And I drew my parents, I drew my family, and then I got to school and I drew all my teachers. And it wasn't really a political thing. I didn't want to change the world. I didn't have any strong philosophies, about left wing, right wing, anything like that. I just like to skewer the egos of people in authority. That always seemed like a good thing to me, a good idea, and it was something I enjoyed doing and I could do because I had this strange skill of being able to cartoon people.
And presumably made friends quite easily.
It's
They
that's
always say the fool, never gets bullied, because if you could make the bullies laugh, or your classmates or the oppressed, because you're poking fun at authority, you are somebody who people like to be with.
that's exactly how it worked. I wasn't particularly good at sport. I wouldn't be someone you would describe as one of the cool kids at school, but I had my drawing, and that's how I made friends. Obviously, inevitably, what would happen was I would do these drawings in class that were for my peers for their amusement, but then someone always grabs it and passes it to the front so the teacher sees it. But I found it fascinating because there'd be a sort of about a 50-50 split between the teachers. They would either be furious and give me a detention, or they'd laugh their heads off and pin it up on the board for the rest of term.
Yes, you
That's
said
really, you know,
in the text at the beginning. You said they would put it up in the in the teachers' room. What do you call that?
oh, in the staff room.
In the staff room.
Yes, I
Yes.
did hear about that. That was one that got confiscated by a teacher who really didn't find it amusing at all, and they had taken it back to the staff room at lunch or something, and were trying to show the other staff this. Don't you think this is outrageous?
Yes.
And they all thought it was so funny. Someone grabbed it and pinned it on their notice board.
Yeah, it sort of backfired a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
which is great. And I always that's true to an extent with politicians. I think there are some politicians who really like being cartooned, and some of them really don't like it. I think most of them know that the worst thing is not to be in cartoons at all because it means you're
Yes.
relevant.
You're not worthy of any comment.
Yes. Yeah, I know that Gordon Brown never liked it. He used to get very upset by how fat cartoonists made him look. And he
Yes.
would then, I never met him, but he would meet some of the newspaper cartoonists and complain to them, which obviously just makes it worse. So they then
Yes.
add a few pounds to their drawings of him.
That's fantastic. Yes, because I used to hear how people used to like the puppet show. Excuse me. Back in the 80s,
Spitting image.
Spitting Image. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And some really hated it, but some, again, if you appeared on Spitting Image, you sort of made it into the public's perception.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You're worthy of being satirized, basically. People think you're dangerous or powerful enough to need taking down a peg or two.
Yes. So have you found with the cartoons of the people that you've drawn that people have come up to you and either complained or said, actually, I quite like that, but could you draw me a bit slimmer or fatter or less?
I've never had any requests like that for actually maybe I think I do remember. I can't remember who it was. It did happen once because I can remember saying, I'm a cartoonist, not a plastic surgeon.
Yes. Good answer.
But I don't remember how. It might have been Nick Clegg. I don't know. I met Nick Clegg once. You see, there'd be these awards every year. They still happen. Obviously, I'm no longer invited, but these awards for cartoonists that happen, and they're in London, and they're quite swanky, and they'll quite often invite a politician along to give out the awards. So I met a few of them in that context.
Yes.
And obviously, on that, they're trying to come across as very supportive of cartooning, then, and make a joke and be quite self-deprecating. It was
Which I imagine is quite hard for them.
quite difficult, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, that it's very strange talking about this now because obviously where I am now, that entire world seems so alien and fake, really.
Yes.
Actually
Yes.
meaningless. But it's still going on. I think it just happened recently. All of the cartoonists who still have a job in the mainstream were doing all their awards and things.
It is. I mean, that whole thing is a bit weird, isn't it? I always used to think of that with the BAFTAs and the Golden Globes and all these sort of things, where they're all just patting each other on the back, and the public lap it up.
Yes, it's very strange, this system of measuring success by what fancy trophies you get at the sort of end of every year. Doesn't necessarily need to be connected to how good your work actually is or how popular it is. It's just, well done. You've obeyed all your orders this year.
Yes.
Here's an award. We can put an article in the paper about it. Isn't our cartoonist fantastic? He won this award. And it's all meaningless, but those things matter so much to people. It's one of the things people are so fearful of losing. It's one of the reasons that they towed the line and they didn't want to speak out because they couldn't possibly imagine losing those fancy parties and
Yes.
being welcome in that setting.
And I find that very strange because the things that mean most to me is if I'll get an email or a letter. Sometimes somebody's found my address and they've sent me a letter and they just say very poignantly, thank you very much for your videos because you've really awakened me to this, that, and the other, whatever it is. You've made a difference. And that is the most important thing. And the reason one gets up and switches the camera on. And I assume it must be a similar thing for you.
Yes, it really, I mean, that being thanked and having connections with real people who live real lives is so much more rewarding. And of course, it's not that we can't have parties. I mean, we our movement know how to throw a great party, as I'm sure you know. And it's much better to be at a party with all these genuine people who you share
Yes.
this connection with than some swanky fake thing in London where everyone's got their head up their own backside.
Yes, trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
The sort of keeping up with the Joneses in the Hollywood fashion.
Yes.
So going back to you then, and you managed to get a job at the Telegraph, and I suppose that's where people started to really sort of catch on to your type of work.
Yeah, I started at the Telegraph when I was 25. Uh,
And is that quite young
I
as a
was very young. I think at the time I was the youngest person ever to have a regular slot at a mainstream paper. And it was a bit jammy in a way. How, I mean, I'd been trying for years to um, get just a chance to draw for a paper because that's all I wanted to do from the age of about 14. So I would just send work to the editors every week. Um, I was working in pubs and hotels and things, and then all my time off, I was trying to draw cartoons to send them, and rarely heard anything. And in 2011, this job came up at the Telegraph because they had sacked their long-standing cartoonist Nick Garland, who'd been there since the 60s, and he was very old. Um, so they were looking for a new kind of person to come and do the two cartoons a week that the main cartoonist doesn't do. Anyway, I got in there and I sort of said the right things and dressed the right way, and they said, "Oh, okay, you can do a trial for a few weeks." Um, but I really wasn't ready, Richard. I didn't have a clue what I was doing because you can't actually working in a newsroom for real to a deadline. Um, and having to tackle news stories that are coming in, different ones every day, you can't practice that. There's no
no.
way of really rehearsing that. You have to go and do it for real.
And are you when you do that, are you on site? Are you in the office with all the noise and everything else buzzing around you?
I was, yes, to begin with.
So it must be quite distracting then, going from presumably a quiet.
It was. But the other thing to stress is it was really thrilling. It was so
Right.
exciting being
Yes.
in that newsroom with that buzz, people rushing about, all the screens up everywhere with news coming in from all over the world, phone calls, people going off for lunches with ambassadors, politicians, people like this. You think, gosh, I'm actually, in
You're at the
something
nub.
really important here. Yeah. Um, and now I would say more the belly of the beast. But then it was, gosh, aren't
Yes.
we all important? Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Especially at 20, in your 20s.
yeah, yeah, and I had a lot to learn, and I'm sort of immediately thinking, oh, I wish I'd worked harder at university in sorting out, the practical things like what materials I was using, and what scale I worked at, and things like this. That I suddenly had to really get all of that nailed down because you can't be worrying about those practical things at the same time as analyzing the news and trying to come up with a gag.
Yes.
So that was really exciting, and as you say, quite distracting. It's very different working in a newsroom. The other thing was that so by this point, most of the other newspapers allowed their cartoonists to work from home already. This is back in 2011. But the Telegraph still insisted that we worked in the office. And the main reason for that was they used to offer these tours for subscribers. You could come and have a tour of the newsroom.
I see.
But the problem with that is, although it seems exciting when you first go in there on a tour, most people are just sitting at a desk looking at a computer.
Yes.
Right? But so they
Or
realized,
on the phone or
or on the
something.
phone,
Yeah.
they realized, oh, if in the corner over here, if we have this cartoon desk where
There's
someone
something. Yes.
paints and there's someone actually making something, and throwing ink about, that would be really exciting. So it was always the main part of the tour was to come and speak to either Matt or myself as, the cartoonist. I mean, and Matt, people will probably know Matt Pritchett, the who does the pocket cartoons, who's a lovely, lovely chap. And he would always speak to the people, but obviously his work's very small and quite simple. I don't want to take anything away from him, but it's quite fast. He does a
Yeah.
drawing in a few minutes. So Whereas I'm there with watercolor paints making a mess and doing something big. And uh, so they like to come and see me as well. And it was always at exactly the wrong time. Really, when you really just need to shut everyone out and focus.
Yes.
I'd usually have popped some headphones in, listen to some music or something, and I'd get a tap on the shoulder, and there'd be 15 people waiting to chat to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I imagine it's great for them because what you're working on, they can see it, and then the following day, it's in the paper.
Yes, that's right. And that,
Whereas everything else, people on screens, it's kind of like, well, what have we taken away from this? But you, they've seen. Oh wow, we saw that, and there it is.
and that was amazing for me as well to um,
Yes.
to have drawn something, and then the next day, on my way into work the following day, on the train, I'll see somebody reading the Telegraph. I remember watching them, thinking, "Oh,
They're
they're
going
going
to
to get
turn
to my
over.
cartoon," you know.
Yeah.
And then if you were, this was quite important really to see because they turn over the page, and if you're lucky, they glance at your cartoon and sort of they might chuckle, they might get a snort or a chuckle,
Yes.
then they move on and start reading the article underneath, and you realize that you only have a few seconds. That's all people give, and that's how cartoons are meant to work. It has to be instantaneous.
Mm.
um and part of me obviously wanted to go over and say, can you just, I spent 6 hours on that yesterday, look at the
Yeah.
detail down here,
Could
come
you?
on, you've missed this bit in the corner. They'd think you're a nutcase, of course, but
Absolutely.
no,
But the
that
advantage is they don't know what you look like, so you're able to watch people, and they don't go, "Oh, there's the guy who drew it. I better give it, undue attention."
yeah, this was always the advantage. This has obviously changed now, and it's still odd for me. And that it's one of the things that appealed to me about being a political cartoonist was I thought your work can be really well known and valued, but nobody's ever going to know what you look like. They probably won't care what you look like or what you think or have to say outside of your cartoons. And that suited me because I'm not a naturally, um, I'm not a showman, I don't want
Mm.
to be famous in that way. And when I began at the Telegraph, I remember the editors saying to me, make sure nobody finds out how young you are, because if our readers know that this stuff is being drawn by a 25-year-old, they just won't find it as funny. In your
Right.
mind, you need to be at least 65.
Right. Somebody who's lived a bit and is
Yeah.
matured, and these are, serious quips that you're saying.
And it was sort of useful because my name is actually Bob. Some people don't know if it's my real name. That is my name, and that helps because most people called Bob are middle-aged or older.
Yes.
Um,
I
and
suppose if you were called Jez or something like that, it would sound very young and trendy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I'm obviously I was always Rob when I was younger, or Robert, and then at school people started calling me Bob because they knew I didn't like it. It stuck.
But
Um,
now it's your trade.
yes, and that was very strange. And still now, even though it's been 4 years now since people started interviewing me, and I did my own live show, and I sort of imagine most people have seen me and know what I look like. I still have people who say, I thought you were so much older, when they meet me.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great because your legend can go on as you get older. They say, "Blimey, we thought you were 100 last, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You must be 200 now."
Yeah.
Do you get? Yes, it's just the special stuff I put on it. So as we, I mean, obviously one of the areas that I know most people watching this would be fascinated is how you started to move away from perhaps the narrative that perhaps your employers at the Telegraph would want, and how you perhaps were putting your own spin on things, and how tolerant they would have been in the early days. So perhaps you could talk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I mean, I never tried to let my own views bother me to influence me too much in terms of what cartoons I was doing, because at the end of the day, the job is you work for the newspaper, you're drawing for their audience. you're collaborating with the editors, and it's your job to come up with ideas that are funny and fit with what the readers will think and what's in the newspaper. It's not to try and push your own views about something. And it was very rare that whatever I was drawing or whatever was the message of the paper massively conflicted with my own thoughts on something. And I even remember talking to editors about. They would say, "Oh, well, that's what's great about you, because some other cartoonists we work with, they do really try and push their views." Um, then, when this all of this started in 2020, I I was immediately, how can I say? I mean, I didn't wake up and get straight away go, this is an agenda, it's a psyop, it's fake, it's not real, they're going to kill everyone with injections. It wasn't that at all. I just thought, seems really, really peculiar, because that obviously there'd been this slow build up from about December 2019 about stories in China that just seemed normal in terms of being a journalist. Talking to newspaper editors, it was just, you roll your eyes and say, oh, it's another Chinese virus thing. That'll be gone in a few months, like all the rest of them. And I remember at the beginning of February, it was just after they declared there was a pandemic, having this discussion with one of my comment editors in the morning, and there wasn't really much news around. And I said, shall I just do something about this pandemic story? And she said, well, okay, but only because it's a slow news day, because we haven't had anything about it yet, and I expect it'll be the last cartoon you ever do on it. Which it wasn't, as it turned out. But
Funny that.
funny that, yeah, but that's because everything about it felt like a story that would just they'd move everyone on from it, wouldn't really go anywhere. Um, and then there was this change. It all started to build, and the media everywhere were deliberately pushing the story to make sure it became something completely dominant that took over from everything else. It was the only thing they wanted people thinking about and worrying about.
And did you, at the time, when you're sort of seeing the editors and the sort of beginning of the day or the day before when they're planning the stories, however it worked, did you get that feeling that they really wanted to push this one story?
Well,
That
no,
there was a
no, no. To begin with, they were all, I would say to them, in telephone conversations in the morning, don't you think this is peculiar? Why is this escalating so much? And they seem to agree. They were where I was, that this seems really over the top, and it doesn't quite make sense why these politicians seem desperate to turn it into a crisis where it obviously doesn't need to be one. Um, and then obviously we're not prepared for it. And we were all seeded with the idea that there could be a pandemic. Of course, this has been in Hollywood and literature for a long time, but we weren't given any of the details about what that would mean. It's not as if everybody had in their minds, oh, when this pandemic comes along, they'll lock us all in their homes and impose communist tyranny. That wasn't it. It was just, yeah,
no.
there might be a pandemic sometime. That's all you have.
Yes, yes,
So none of us had had time to contemplate what that would mean. This idea of lockdowns, so sort of towards the end of February, you get this word floating about lockdown, and in China they're welding people into their flats. But then I remember back then, journalists like Laura Kuenssberg, Robert Peston, back when I still watched the television, were saying, well, this is going to be a big problem because obviously Western democracies can't do that. They can only do that in China because it's communist.
yes.
you know, and so what are our governments going to do? This idea of lockdowns isn't an option for us. I thought,
And
well, that's good. That makes sense, which does make sense, obviously. That
yes,
was right. They were correct.
yes, absolutely. Something went wrong though.
Something went
But
wrong.
Just that idea of welding people into their house. I mean, presumably, I mean, I would imagine. I mean, I can, knowing what you do and knowing your amazing pictures, you can almost see a Bob Moran cartoon of the Chinese welding with sparks and all of this, and some poor little
Yeah.
chap. You could see it already happen. Was that sort of a notion that that sort of nonsense already permit? Could you see images like that and go, "Wow, that would be interesting"?
Yeah, so at that stage, obviously, all I'm thinking about is, regardless of what the truth is here, so maybe there is a horrible pandemic, maybe it is going to be a big disaster. This all seems really farcical, and there's something really silly about all of this, all these
Yes.
ideas and the things, and particularly once our government, then says, "Oh, we are doing lockdowns after all," and start to bring in all these silly rules like dog walkers being chased by police and things like that. I thought, well, for now, while I figure out my own position on this, I'm just going to focus on the silliness of it all because there's so much opportunity for comedy, and I think because I could see from the beginning how focused they were on fear. Yeah, so these are ones from the Telegraph from 2020.
And I mean, there's fantastic images. Oh, sure, I'd love to go back to work, but my health has to come first.
Yeah,
So if you can see that on the
there are
top.
so many funny contradictions
Yes.
that I could focus on and create, entertaining images about. And I thought, well, they're pushing fear on us so much. They're really trying to let fear dominate us. So anything I can do um, to counteract that is going to be a good thing because no matter how genuine the emergency is, I understood you can't have people governed by fear ever. It's
Yes.
not going to work.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was
A very rational point of view.
well, yeah, and obviously I think
Not shared by the government, however.
no. And then obviously you begin to think, doesn't actually, if it's really going to be as bad as they want us to think, I don't quite understand why they're encouraging us to be afraid. Surely you would expect the opposite thing of trying to keep people calm, put everything in context, say, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There was none of that.
No.
That big, began to make me suspicious about what was going on and what the truth of it was. Um, and then aside from all that, I reached this understanding probably within 3 or 4 weeks that the ethics were all wrong, that morally this was completely wrong. There was no argument for the state doing this to people ever, whatever the truth of the story was. And I remember having a discussion about that with my editors and saying, listen, I'd like to focus on those arguments. You know, you can bicker about the science and the modeling and the data all we want, but the moral point is being lost here. I'm not seeing any of these politicians confronted with the ethical questions of, but these measures will directly harm people. They'll actually directly kill people. So you are now engaging in trading lives. How do you justify that? How many people are you willing to kill with lockdowns to stop a virus? Have you thought about that? Can you put a number on it? These questions are really important, and it was as if they didn't even exist. There wasn't even a problem. So, and they were perfectly fine with that. They said, okay, yeah, we're happy for you to pursue that course and create work based on those arguments, which I started doing, and they proved really popular. And for me, I suddenly realized, and it surprised me, I realized I really cared about this stuff. I actually loved suddenly drawing about pictures about fundamental values and family, you know, fear and risk and these things that are totally outside of politics. And I started to do quite a lot of pictures that didn't feature any politicians at all, which was really interesting.
I mean, you've got one in here. Let me see if I can find it with the little girl hugging her granny. And it's so
Oh yes,
having here we go, having gone through it, And looking back, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons here. Having gone through it and looking back, it's so much more poignant now. I mean, I'm sure it meant something at the time, but now you sort of go, did we really go through that?
Well, the interesting thing, so both of those cartoons you've got there on those pages were both rejected by the Telegraph, and I tried to get them in several times, on different days, and they kept saying no, they wouldn't. And well, in both cases, it was because they wouldn't. They said they wouldn't publish things that encourage people to break the rules. You know,
Right.
so
Oh,
which
right. So some risks are always worth taking. Is clearly, go and see your granny because
yeah,
you
no,
know
one was going
she's your
to
granny. She's your granny. That is and you may not see her,
yeah.
but yeah,
It was, and I think I did say it was extraordinary that you are taking this position as a newspaper that these rules are acceptable. You know,
yes,
I and I said, what about the precedents being set here? Because the Telegraph likes to think of itself as the paper of, I suppose, the church, of Christianity, of the royal family, of our values as a people, as a culture.
right,
So I was sort of thinking, I think you should be making a stand here and saying, no, these rules are wrong. A conservative government should not be doing this stuff, shouldn't be um, interfering in the deepest areas of the most intimate parts of people's lives here. It's not the state's place to do this. Anyway, um, that now those also what they also said was those pictures were, I think, I can't remember the exact words they used, but basically a bit soppy, a bit too emotional. Not technically a cartoon, which is true to an extent. That's a good point. They're not meant to be funny. They're supposed to be poignant.
mm.
I hadn't really done that type of work before, but I, and at a different time, in a different context, they would seem strange and a bit naff. Why
Yes,
why are you drawing a picture of a girl hugging her granny? It doesn't make any sense. In the context of what was happening, though, these things suddenly became really powerful and rebellious. You know,
yes, yes, of
uh,
course,
and I had realized that people needed to see this. People needed to be reminded of these values and these truths that they had forgotten, they'd been made to forget. So I began to put out these pictures in my free time, at weekends or in the evening when I got home. And I'd just post them on social media. Um, and I'd never done that before. I'd never posted anything that wasn't from the paper. And they were really, really popular. In fact, they were more popular than anything I was doing for the Telegraph. So that planted a seed in my mind of, what does this mean? Is it the right place for me to be? Um, and also, it started to get me this hot new audience who didn't read the paper, who hadn't seen, like you, Richard, never
mm.
seen my work before, but suddenly, who is this guy who's doing this stuff that we all agree with and we think is the right message? Um, so I started to build up this new audience of people, and that was helped by Peter Hitchens, who started sharing my work all the time, and that got me a wider audience. And then as as that audience grew, and I sort of became bolder, I suppose, I was doing more of this work separately to the paper that was for that other audience. Things got increasingly tense with the
Yes,
Telegraph
I
as
can
we got
imagine.
nearer to the jab rollout, basically.
Yes,
Um, and it reached this point where I was sort of told, okay, forget about lockdowns now, and we're going to stop being so hard on the government and the prime minister, because now that the vaccines have arrived, it's a wonderful thing. It's a fantastic accomplishment, and we're all going to get behind this thing. And could you please do some cartoons promoting the vaccines, which I wouldn't do. Um, and I tried to be, I tried to sort of, at first, I tried to not to just say, you know, no,
no.
because I think they're going to kill everyone. I sort of said things like, well, I don't know if I thought this is bloody rich, actually. You've been telling me I can't do a cartoon of a girl hugging her grandmother because it's soppy and that's not technically a cartoon. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't really see how a cartoonist remit is promoting medical products to readers.
Yes.
How is that a cartoon? And you've got enough of that in the rest of the paper.
Yes, it must have been full of it.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and that was odd for me, and it always had been actually throughout because the main source of revenue for all newspapers was the government advertising throughout this period. So although I was being allowed to do these cartoons saying how immoral lockdowns were and things like that, they'd be surrounded by adverts, download the NHS app or whatever it was
Oh, yes.
every day. Very odd. So yes, the jab thing got very awkward, and I sort of tried to say, look, I'm not going to promote them, but I won't try and do anything against them in the paper. So can we just compromise on that? And they were really putting a lot of pressure on me, and I did do a couple, um, on days where you're really fed up with arguing, and it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're saying, do something about the rollout. And this was when it was all about how slow it was, how slow they were to get these jabs, which I obviously thought was fantastic.
Mm.
Then they thought was a bad thing. So I did a couple about just the fact that it was slow. And I regret doing those not only because I didn't agree with them, but also because they were rubbish cartoons. Because they always are rubbish when it's not your idea,
Yes.
when it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're just giving in to the editor's pressure of do something on this. So I think because I did a couple of times, I did kind of sort of give in and do those, and I felt so bad about it. It's part of the reason that later on I did things like Stand Firm. The demon. A lot of people have probably seen it. The demon with the mother protecting her child.
Oh, and what a strong word. And did that go? Was that for the paper?
No, no, not at all.
No, I was going to say.
No.
um,
That would never
that's
be in the newspaper. No. So
no. Uh,
that was before I lost my job, and it was because we had a baby at the start of 2021, and they gave me 6 months paternity leave, so I was off for a lot of that time when the jabs were really being rolled out. Um, and so during my time off, I did several cartoons that were really what I'd been wanting to say for a long time. Obviously, knowing that the could be controversial with the newspaper, but I didn't care by that point. I thought it's just too important. Um,
just
yeah,
trying to find.
that cartoon went all around the world, really.
Yeah. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant, and it just, again, as I said at the beginning, with razor sharp um, messaging. I can't find it now, which is a real shame.
Is it on? I should know what page it is. It on the
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I've got it. And it's so good that you just put a blank page next to it as well, so your attention goes straight to it. Oh, I keep pressing the wrong.
Yes, I did do that with a few. There are a few I didn't want to have another cartoon with them. Yeah.
And the way the woman is standing so defiantly with her little child there. I mean, it's just amazing.
But
And
it's very strange because that's one of the fastest pieces I've ever done. It took me no time at all, and I didn't sketch it out or anything. It was like it was almost a bit of a spiritual moment where it was as if somebody else put the image in my head, and I desperately had to just get it out onto paper.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely amazing. And in the book, I have to say, you come across it and you go, oh, wow, oh yeah, we remember that feeling. I mean, those of us, who were resistance and felt the pressure,
Yeah,
because it was
yeah,
huge amount of pressure.
that desperation, and I think that understanding that there is a very short window of time here to prevent something that is so huge and so catastrophic that may never be undone. It could be a permanent, this could be a shift um, in terms of where our species goes after this, of what we can
Yes.
do, and we've got maybe 4 months to try and stop as many people do. And obviously, you know, we can all look back and say, oh, we should have done more. And
Were you aware of other cartoonists across the world doing similar things?
a few, yes, not very many. Um, there weren't really any others here. Obviously, all my colleagues and peers at other papers who I'd been great friends with for years went the other way completely.
Mm.
And for a few months, they sort of sent me messages saying, "You're a lunatic. What are you doing? You've lost your mind." And then I never heard from them again.
Yes.
I became aware of germ warfare. I don't know if you know Jeremy Nell. He's South African.
Right.
He has a podcast as well, and he's a cartoonist. So I was aware of his stuff quite early on. Now, who else is there? I'm trying to think of.
And were you communicating with any of them saying, look, I'm taking this stance, but everybody, the public who are on your side love it, but the authorities are really on me, what chance have I ever working again type
Yes,
thing?
yeah, no, I did get in touch with them. Um, I think the few others who were doing it were already working in a position where they were kind of freelance.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Guess
think
that's the only way you could do it.
I was the sort of the only person who had a full-time job. I mean, I was fully employed by the Telegraph, and it took me 7 or 8 years to get to that point where I persuaded them to actually give me a salary and pension and paid holiday. And that is very, very unusual nowadays for a cartoonist to have that level of employment. Most of them are just kept on retainers.
Right.
And that was a fantastic thing. And obviously, I've got 3 young children and a wife and a house with a mortgage. And I thought, I can't throw this away. I'll never get it again. I'll never have this level of financial security again. And that was always at the back of my mind when I'm thinking, I don't know if I should be at the paper anymore, and I've got this new audience, and there's all these things I need to say that I can't. Um, and I don't know whether I think probably I might have left of my own accord eventually. I'd like to think I would, but fortunately now I think it's fortunate that the decision was made for me and they booted me out.
So there you are with a child, you get sacked, and your popularity on social media is going, but how are you earning a living?
Um, well, I mean, it was pretty touch and go for a while because we were having um, this big building project done here. We're having various things done to the house because my eldest daughter's disabled, and we were having to do things to make the house more suitable for her, raise floor levels and things like that, and had all these builders here. And when I was sacked, it was obviously there was a bit about it in the rest of the media, Private Eye and places like that who were publishing articles saying, Telegraph's mad conspiracy theorist cartoonist has been fired after, 2 years of spouting rubbish online or whatever it was. Anyway, the builders heard about it, sort of saying, how are you gonna pay us?
Yes,
And I'm
somewhat.
thinking, I don't know, and I thought, what do I do? And I knew I couldn't get a job at another newspaper, obviously, and I didn't really want a job at another newspaper. Um, and I had a few people offer me work, but it wasn't sort of anything regular. Um, I got so many emails and letters from people who just wanted to support me and
Mm.
wanted me to keep going, saying, please don't stop what you're doing. There's nobody else doing this, and we really need your work. And they said then actually, oh, if you bring out a book, we'll all buy it. And I thought, well, that would be great, but Yeah. So 3 years later, I have. But at that time, I thought it's too early to bring out a book. This is we're still only at the beginning of this. There's so much more to
Yes.
tell. So I thought, no, that's not right. Um, but I mean, how did I think the advantage I had was that I'd been working traditionally for years. I sort of ignored all the tutors at university and the pressure that's put on my generation of everything has to be digital. And I just do my cartoons in ink and watercolor, which means I end up with originals that people can buy.
Right.
So
And
people,
I love in the book just to right at the beginning, you show us the tools of your trade,
yeah, oh yes, I really
and
enjoy doing that bit.
let me just get that on the screen here, because it's anybody could do it. I mean, obviously not anybody could do it because, but what I'm saying is that you've got these basic things that anybody could buy and have a go.
Yeah. Well, it's because when I was younger and I was always looking at books by cartoonists or artists that I liked, and all I really wanted to know is how do you actually do it? What materials do you use? I want to know what paper it is and what ink, so I can try it.
And you
So I
and you
thought,
say and you say, I mean, you've got this lovely little bit here. I don't want to
right,
ruin the book, but you get, you sort of basically say, go and give it a whirl, which
yes,
I think is fantastic. And there you are, presumably at work.
yeah, that's me at my desk, which is not which is just to the left of me here. It's my Here is the real Branston jar on the book.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen.
So I've had this for about 15 years now, maybe longer. It's been with me.
Wonderful.
One of those things that you just don't want to let go of.
I'm sadly I'm very aware of time. We're 45 minutes in, and I like to keep this within an hour. And you have sent me some of your images, and I'd like to go through some of those and show them so that you could
Okay.
talk us through some of the thoughts behind it. But I appreciate that we haven't really sort of gone into at the moment where you break free and you really come into your own, I suppose, with all that amazing inspiration. But before we just get onto that, I do want to ask you this, and you kind of touched on it briefly just a minute ago, and people have asked me the same question, and it's sometimes very difficult to say yes or no to this. But do you feel that you mentioned about spirituality? Do you feel that everything in the past, your skills and all of the practicing, has brought you to this moment to you were sort of born at this time to do this work?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Very much so. But the thing is, that can sound quite arrogant, saying that
Yeah, I know.
I was sent here to save you all, and
Exactly.
I don't really mean it like that at all. But I could tell that what I was doing was making a big difference to people. So I felt a real obligation to keep doing it. And once I understood what we were up against and how serious this was, you think there's no point in being half-assed about this. I need to be as good as I possibly can be. And I did think this is obviously why I've had these skills. I had those 10 years at the Telegraph, learning all the things I needed to learn and understanding the machine. I thought I have this inside knowledge of how journalism works and how the machine works, the system. And now I'm outside of it. I can criticize it in a different way to someone who doesn't really know what goes on inside. And yeah, and you suddenly look back at everything that's happened in your life and you think, oh, now I understand why I had to go through that because what I
Yes.
learned there is so helpful to me now. Absolutely everything like that. But it made me feel very small in a way, very humble, because you understand that something above you has placed you here with a purpose.
Yes.
So rather than you know,
And
strutting about like I'm Superman or something. It was very much, blimey, if I am supposed to be doing this, can you help me? You know,
yeah. Because if you knew in your 20s when you first got the job, let's say that you're here for this purpose, and by the way, in 10 years time or
Yeah,
20 years, you'd be going, oh, this is a
absolutely.
bit too much to deal with.
Yeah.
But and of course you're unique because nobody else really to your standard, and is doing what you're doing, and that of course makes you're not.
No,
It's not
that's
like hundreds and hundreds of other cartoonists who are just putting stuff out all the time. That you're just one of them going, oh yeah, I'm here to save the world.
yeah.
It's the uniqueness of what you do, and how you're perceived is that's what screams to me. And people have said it about me, and again, it's like so humbling. You say, I don't know,
Well, it's a big responsibility, isn't it? It's not. Obviously, it's lovely to hear these things. It's really nice, um, but it's also you do feel this big weight of responsibility sometimes when there are all these people who look to you to do
yes.
whatever it is you do, and to help guide them through what's happening. Um,
And then you think, am I doing it right? Have I got it wrong this time?
yeah, exactly. But
Have I
that's,
cocking out? Have I gone off track? And I feel that all the time.
I suppose, to come back to me losing my job, being fired, and everything. Uh, I suppose this is the important thing: is I what was difficult about it was, for years I've been able to rely on a system, on a brand. I had a platform. I had editors above me. I had a team of lawyers at the paper who can help. If you do something people don't like, you can always say, "Oh, that was the editor's idea. It wasn't my
Yeah,
idea," or whatever. I was just trying
someone
to do that.
else
All of that was gone, and you're suddenly completely on your
on your
own.
own. Yeah,
And you have to own everything you do. Everything you put out you have to really understand it and have conviction about what it's saying.
yeah,
That's hard to begin with. It's a big adjustment. But I think what you understand, and this is a key point that's been lost across all of this, is the more responsibility you take, the more freedom you have. People have been told the opposite. Abandon your responsibilities, give them all to the state, and they'll give you back freedom. That's not how it works. The more responsibility you can take, the more free you will be. And now I do spend longer sometimes thinking about a cartoon. I mean, sometimes I will let an idea sit for a few weeks, or when some new issue comes up that everybody's talking about, I sometimes won't immediately react because I think very carefully about what I want to say or what I think people need to be told about this thing. And I make sure I absolutely agree with what I'm going to draw, because you might have a really funny idea, like, oh, you could draw this and it'd be hilarious, but you've got to make sure it's what you think is the right message. And then you move sort of onto another stage where you actually realize you shouldn't even worry about upsetting your own audience, about the people love everything else you do and follow you.
yes,
You also have a responsibility sometimes to challenge them.
yes, no, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm sure I piss my audience off regularly. But let's have a look at some of these wonderful images. You very kindly sent some in. So we'll start. They're in no particular order, but maybe you can just tell us what inspired you, or the approach, or whether you sent it out immediately, or anything that comes to mind, really.
yeah. That one is. I mean, I had always thought a lot about this concept of the sort of Mayan sacrifice, and the way that this theme ran through everything. Of we're essentially killing you, or sacrificing you to placate these fake gods we've made up, whatever it is, whether it's a virus or climate change um, or anything else. I'd done one for the Telegraph on the same theme a couple of years earlier, but it was kind of tame because, again, they said, well, let's don't make it too gory or whatever. So this one was interesting because I thought I'm gonna do that idea again, but exactly how I want to do it, not
Yes.
not for the kind of PG rating of Telegraph readers.
Let's have a look at this one.
Oh, that's a very popular one. Yes, the phrenology map of the person's brain. Sometimes these are tricky because you think, how cruel should I be to the people, the ordinary people, the normal,
Yes.
whatever you want to call them, who don't get it, and obviously I understand the argument of, don't just take the piss out of them all the time. You have to engage with them, and you've got to try and help them along. But I think it's sort of quite funny. I mean, hopefully some people might see themselves in it. It's also comforting for those of us who've spent so long desperately trying to wake up friends and family, and they won't listen. And I think in some ways this image sort of showed them that, look, we've all had to deal with these people. You're not.
And the level of brainwashing that has been pushed on us and all of that, I think that's, it just shows that every element of the brain has been poked at.
This is it. These are all ideas that a person could only have in their brain if they'd watched enough television, basically.
Yes, thanks to mainstream media.
Yeah, that one is another one that was really quite powerful, and I did have some reservations about it actually. I was worried it was a bit too strong, maybe a bit too dark in what it was saying, and is it fair to sort of make out that these elderly people are sacrificing children? It's not really what it's trying to say. It's more that the baby has been strapped to them, whether
Yes.
they like it or not.
And he's a strident character, he may have a stick, but he is walking with purpose. He's not.
Yes. Yeah.
He's not sort of degenerating in a chair somewhere.
No, I didn't make it. In fact, I remember in the sketch he did look a bit more He did look a bit more hobbling and bent, and I didn't think it was quite right. It's interesting you noticed that, Richard, because yeah, some of these things are sort of subtle details that I know are important, but I think,
Well, you have you get energy into a picture, which I think is something that's very difficult for a novice to get going with. That you can look at something and the picture, you can draw somebody running,
yeah,
but and it must be something that comes with experience and what have you. But the lines or the energy that comes in it, so that even though someone's just walking towards you, you see the real power in his gait there as the determined nature, and nothing's going to stop him, and he's protecting the baby.
yes.
Not it's not the baby's going to make him ill.
It's interesting that energy thing, because you can try and mimic it a lot, and you spend a lot of time when you're young copying other artists, but it only comes when you work out your own what your own style is and how you can do that through your own style.
Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't tell people not to copy. I think it's really important when you're starting out, copy people you like and try and
Well,
mimic them.
I mean, the one we just showed with the monster and the syringe and the woman, and she's got her arm back there, and she's it again. There's such defiant energy that just comes from quite small looking people,
Yeah.
compared to this monster. I mean, it is, you have a wonderful gift.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Christmas is
that's
coming.
the most recent one. That came out a week or so ago. Because I thought I should do something festive, because I always do a Christmassy one around this time of year. But
I hadn't seen this before because you sent it me just before we recorded. There it is, good old Arla milk.
yeah, yeah. So obviously, milk and cookies is a bit of an American thing, and people here will know that Father Christmas prefers brandy and cheese,
Yes,
or a mince pie. But
absolutely.
yeah, milk. I thought, well, the milk and cookies thing, everyone knows about it, so it'll be quite fun. And it's just so incongruous to paint something quite pretty like that. It could be a Christmas card and have him throwing up.
Yes. And it's the I mean, it'll get children saying, "Mummy,
Yeah.
why why is Father Christmas being sick?"
Well, obviously, now
Oh,
I would like to point out, of course, Father Christmas can't really get sick. He doesn't get sick, and I don't know if people may remember those disgusting ads that were put out, a couple of years ago of why Father Christmas needs to have the vaccine, you know,
oh my
so
goodness.
that he can come and deliver the presents.
Yes, how awful is that?
Yeah, they were horrendous. So it's only
Um,
for the purposes of a joke.
absolutely. We've got a couple more, so let's because this one was hilarious as we all went to or some of us. I didn't actually go to the ballot box.
No, neither did I. And this is obviously another point of contention between people. Should we vote or should we not vote or anything? But what I quite liked about this was I thought, because I did think, shall I do a cartoon telling people not to vote at all? I thought, well, no, not quite that, but just this idea that by the time we got to the last election, almost everybody agreed on the two cheeks of the same arse
Yeah.
idea. Um, and I thought, oh, actually, it'd be quite nice to do one that's kind of largely uncontroversial, as in people won't look at and go, oh, that's some mad conspiracy theory. Um, and again, and this was very popular, and it kind of was one of those ones that breaks through. Sometimes I'll do one that
Yes.
starts to get picked up by people who are not in our movement, if you like. The King Charles one was another one that I think almost everyone in the country seemed to have seen.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
And that's in your book. And but what I love about that is not only are we focusing on where the ballot box paper might go, but also the chemtrails in the
yeah,
background.
yeah. So this is it, Richard. I couldn't resist. I couldn't keep it entirely normie friendly. I had to, because then you think, well, if a lot of them are going to be looking at it, let's just stick some chemtrails in.
Absolutely fantastic. Just two more then.
This now I get a lot of people tell me this is their favorite image. Um, this is called Beacons, and I think it was at a time when I think I did it around the same time I did the King Charles one, and I'd done some very dark pictures. Obviously, a lot of my ones focus on the horrible people doing these things, and
Mm,
there's a lot of darkness, and it means I have to spend a lot of time immersed in the horrible things going on. And
yes.
a friend came round to see us, and she just said, I think it'd be really good if you could just do something entirely positive and focused on us, whatever you want to call us, the awake, the freedom movement, but all of the people who understand what's going on. And I thought, yeah, that's a really good idea. So I went away and I did this one, and people love it. It means an awful lot to people, this picture.
Yeah. I mean, that turbulent sea and these beacons of hope of people, all over the place doing their thing. Because that's something that I would get when I would go and do talks and things. People would say, "Is it just us?"
Yeah,
And I'd say, "Well, no, actually, last week I was talking to another bunch of people who said the same question." And I said, "You," and this was, I suppose, quite early on when I was doing what I'm doing, and I'm only sort of relatively new to all of this. But I would say, "Yeah, you need to talk to that group and then that group,"
yeah,
so people were so grateful to know that they weren't on their own,
yeah. That's
or
exactly it. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
and so that's what makes that really magic. And finally, then on this, I think something we might all agree with.
Well, that's what a very early one. I think. When was that? That was another one I did around the same time I did Stand Firm when I was off on paternity leave. And again, it was something I thought they would never put this in the newspaper, but I'd really like to do it. Um, yeah, and again, it's sort of a farming countryside theme, which is obviously we're all thinking about at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah,
In fact, I remember that
absolutely.
was the first time I saw you, Richard, was a video. This must be 2 or 3 years ago now. So very, very kind of ahead of your time. It was just you strolling through the countryside, basically talking about this is where they don't want us. This is what they're trying to take away from us. Um, They don't want you walking here. They don't want you living here. They want people in the cities. It's very astute. And obviously, you go from there to where we've got to now with the farming stuff. And
It's all coming to fruition.
yeah, yeah, sadly.
But none of we can help it as much as we can. So I'm aware that we're sort of. I like to keep these just within an hour, mostly because if people see it's longer, they don't necessarily have time, and then they'll sort of give up, which is a shame. But so let's do the plug then. This is a very beautiful book, I have to say. It's a lovely coffee table book, and if you've got normies coming round for Christmas, it's the sort of thing you can have on the side there that will make people go, "Well, what does that mean?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I sort of designed. That's why I designed the cover that way, so it's sort of intriguing, but it doesn't give anything away. So I
Yes.
want people to pick it up and open it, and then get a bit of a shock.
If
Um,
I'm
so it's available to order at you can go to bobmoran.newsprints.co.uk.
which I should put in the link. I love the fact that you put some of the early sketches for the picture in. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, so there are sketches in there. Sometimes they're preliminary sketches I did. That one is a sketch. So I did that sketch. That was going to be the Easter cartoon that year. And then I changed my mind and I ended up doing the one on the right. That was a sort of a bleaker message, but I liked that first one so much. So I sort of put that sketch in there. Some of them are, there are a few pictures that aren't even really sketches. They're kind of pages from my sketchbooks where I'm just brainstorming, scribbling things down.
There's just a beautiful array, a beautiful array of images that will take you back to those. I mean, they'll just take you back to instances that you go, oh yeah.
It's also, this is my thought process. It's the development of my thinking throughout this time because it's almost exactly chronological the way the cartoons have been laid out. So
Yeah,
you
some
can
and
kind of
some
get,
very, very, very strong. If I can find the camera properly.
oh yeah,
Some,
that's another one that I thought should go on its own.
yeah,
It's just very, very sad picture. But again, I thought something people needed to be sad about because they were all sad about slightly the wrong thing at that time.
absolutely, absolutely, an amazing book. So I'll put the link in the description,
Oh, thank you.
of course, and so hopefully people will go and they've still got time to get it before Christmas.
There is still just about time to get it for Christmas. Oh, and I should say as well, I think you're a friend of the barn at Ledbury, aren't you?
Yes,
Yes,
Robin
I'm going
Robin
to
Oakey.
be there on Saturday doing a signing.
Oh, there you go. So if you've got your books, or you'll take a pile with you.
I'll have some with me to buy, or if you've already got one, you can bring it along and I'll sign it.
So there we go, Ledbury, the barn in Ledbury. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's a shame we haven't actually bumped into each other on the rounds, but hopefully we will.
Oh, yeah, it's quite curious because I imagine we've probably been to the same places and done a lot of the same events, but our
Yes,
paths never
I've often
crossed.
heard, oh yeah, Bob was coming, or Bob was here last week. It's like, I missed
Yeah,
him.
you just missed Richard. He's just gone out the door.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Well, no, I'm sure we'll meet in real life soon enough.
it would be great. But thank you so much for spending the time with the audience and myself. It's been absolutely brilliant. I hope the sales go through the roof.
Thank
You're
you.
doing such remarkable work, and it's really great to have had this chat. And I wish it had been longer, but
Well,
that
perhaps we
means
could do another one.
we could do another one.
Another
Exactly.
one, or maybe we'll do something live at some point. That would be good. Have a chat.
That yeah, that would. Do you ever think that you could do? Oh, hang on. I'll be careful how I say this. I was going to say, and this is totally non-right now.
We'll go
Would you
for
ever
it.
do a Rolf Harris?
That's cool. Don't worry, I do make jokes about Ralph Harris in my
But what I mean is,
my
can you
live
see
show.
what
I
doing
make
a live drawing so that
Well, I
you
did.
could?
I did. So I did a live show. This is we can't get into it too much, but I did do a live show that a lot of people might have come to see. We managed to do it 3 times before it was just cancelled so much I couldn't really do it anymore. But people can see that on if they go to my Twitter profile, you can watch the whole thing free. It's on there.
Oh, brilliant.
I do live drawing on stage in that, and I do actually make a Rolf Harris joke
Can
because
you see what it is yet?
I did genuinely grow up watching Rolf's cartoons,
Well, didn't we all? Yeah.
and that was sort of helped me to learn how to draw. So yes,
So there you go.
but no, no. To answer your question directly, I won't be doing a Rolf Harris in any sense.
Absolutely. Bob Moran, thank you so much for being my wonderful guest today. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the show. All the stuff is in the description that you need to know. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Been my pleasure too. Thank you, Richard. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas to you. I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. Till next time, from Bob and myself, goodbye.